Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. Today we will be back in our book review of Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. We'll be covering page 14. This is a very important part of the book, and this theme mentioned will carry on throughout the book. It is that of imagination. In fact, R. Nelson Nash made sure to put in a quote from Albert Einstein, who said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Now that really struck me, that someone as well known for his knowledge in science and mathematics, a real marvel, a real genius, a legitimate and authentic genius of his time, said himself that imagination was more important than knowledge. So it struck me. I hope that it strikes you as well. Now, Nash was saying imagination in a few other words. He started by saying that to consider, to vet, to understand, and to implement the idea of becoming your own banker, to practice the infinite banking concept, that it would actually be an exercise in a few things. Starting with imagination, but then followed also by reason, logic, and prophecy. Now, imagination on page 14 in the 5th edition is the entire theme of that particular page. So I would like to walk that out a little more by the example that he gave of young Carl Gauss. Now, young Carl, allegedly when he was 7 years old, and this is what Nash relates in his book, so let's briefly summarize and then perhaps discuss it. This 7-year-old child, as well as the rest of the class, was prompted to take the number 1 all the way through the number 100 and add all of those numbers together and then present the answer to the teacher. So everyone is furiously going about the task with their slate and chalk and whatnot. And this young man just seemed to be sitting there pondering, looking out the window or what have you. And presently, he presented the answer to the teacher. And the teacher was astounded, having noticed that young Carl was not writing furiously like many others were, laboriously going about finding this answer. And when asked how because he did indeed come up with a correct answer, when asked how he arrived at that correct answer, he explained something that what we will see was already an established mathematical truth. There was something that already existed, and yet he is the one, young Carl, who is renowned for having discovered it, noticed it. And that's in line with my understanding, where a very old book said that there's nothing new under the sun, and yet he arrived at understanding this concept just by using some imagination. So what he described himself as doing in his mind was he went to the halfway point between 1 and 100, and then he imagined, and this is me using my own words, a hinge, let's say, where he could fold one half on top of the other. Because see, if you take the extremities of that spectrum, 1 and 100, and you add them together, you arrive at 101. And if you move inwards and you add 2 plus 99, you arrive at 101. And he realized, he discovered that that same principle was going to take effect in each of those numbers moving towards the center. So he just went right to the center, folded the two halves upon each other, and then worked from there. So what he showed the teacher was that there was a system that could be implemented uniquely, never having been done before, and yet it was based off of a truth that already existed. So young Carl didn't invent how those numbers would do what they did. He just discovered and realized and understood by using his imagination. And again, let me go back to that point, because while others were furiously writing things out or studying their books or consulting each other, young Carl Gauss was thinking. He was pondering, brainstorming, masterminding. He was using his imagination. And this is what he arrived at, was that he was able to split that range in half, fold the two pieces together. And it was a very neat, concise, quick system. So Nash points out that there was a fixed relationship between those numbers. But what young Carl did for himself and for the world is showed that by using imagination with what we have before us, that we could come up with a new, at least unbeknownst to us, new way of going about things by understanding fixed relationships and using those numbers to our advantage. Now, having begun a conversation on imagination, let's have another exercise. In this exercise, much like Nash, we're going to ponder a situation where we would be both the consumer, the customer, and the owner or the seller. So being on both sides of a table, for example. Now, this particular example, this particular analogy that Nash proposed in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker, is going to be held throughout. There will be references made right here and right now that will permeate the rest of the book. They're definitely a big part of the foundation of the book itself. And that's going to be where we are the owners of a grocery store. And yet, we're also the consumer. If you're like me and like to eat, you can easily understand how you would be the consumer. Now let's put ourselves also in the position of being the owner and consider what it would look like. And it's important to run this scenario recognizing ourselves in both positions. Because firstly, we see that as a business owner, we're going to have an unlimited market. There's no telling who may walk in a store if we will go through the effort of opening one up. Also, we're going to have certain folks that are what would be called captive customers, as Nash says in his book. So those friends and family members and neighbors, those that know you the best, that trust you the most, that are within your inner circle, who would they buy from if not you? They're going to buy groceries. Why wouldn't they buy it from their brother, their father, their cousin, their neighbor, their what have you? So you're going to have certain family members, certain captive customers that are going to be natural customers of that grocery store. Now, you take all the time to study the market. You are going to spend an extensive amount of time and money to bring this to fruition, to be sure. So again, I don't want to walk too quickly by that because we'll get to capitalization more later in the book, but this is the capitalization phase of a business. There is a lot that needs to be done if you want to succeed, and there's no business that should be in business if they want to succeed without doing, and will in fact have to do a certain, even to start, even if ultimately it fails, it must start doing a certain amount of studying, planning, acquiring capital, spending time doing things, setting things up, because you're going to have a location. You're going to have a beautiful building. You're going to have state-of-the-art equipment, well-trained, competent personnel, and on and on and on. So again, we're putting ourselves in those shoes to bring all of this about. So we can't go too quickly past that beginning phase of before the doors are ever opened, what it takes for us to be able to arrive at that particular point. Because we do want to earn an income in our lifetime, in our working years, let's say. But ultimately, also, we recognize that many businesses are begun for the intended purpose of eventually, after growing and scaling and living well in the meantime, ultimately to sell that business. And again, remember that we will be launching our grocery store knowing good and well that there are many other grocery stores already established, also with their beautiful buildings and their competent personnel and their low prices, and we're going to be starting from scratch. And part of that starting from scratch means acquiring and establishing an inventory. So, for example, let's take a can of peas. Now, this can of peas, we realize by reading these sections, let's say it's page 15 and 16 in Becoming Your Own Banker, that a can of peas, much like many things in the grocery store, have a small margin. So let's say that the can of peas must be sold 15 times. So 15 cans of peas must be sold just to break even. And then what Nash says is if 17 cans are sold, then we will become profitable. And if 20 cans of peas are sold, then we may retire early. So there's a small margin we see per can between 15, 17, 20. That incremental, that infinitesimal difference compounded, again, remember, if we're going to work this business, run this business, build this business for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever the case may be, that over the course of time that will compound on itself. Those little gains can end up being very, very large over the course of time. And that inventory is necessary. It's incumbent upon us to have the shelf stock, to have plenty stored in the back, to have plenty on the way, have a well-established distribution center, because again, like Nash points out, if there are not full shelves, folks won't be shopping there for very long when they notice gaps and holes and a lacking supply of inventory. So let's now look at a physical phenomenon, and a great one that changed the face of the earth. Let's take water, go to sea level, and turn that water up to 210 degrees. Now we're going to have very, very hot water. Let's then take another pot of water at sea level and turn it up just 2 more degrees, 212 degrees. Well, what we will have is boiling water. Both are very, very hot. They're within a literal 2 degrees of each other. And yet the difference between that margin, and again remember, in considering the peas and how many times they need to be turned over and what a small margin that is, the difference over the course of time. So with boiling water, we have steam. With steam, we can have steam-powered locomotives that can move the world. I mean, when steam power came about, the face of the earth changed. Railroads were able to go transcontinental, and just so many different things changed again because of that minute difference, that infinitesimal difference between 210 degree water, 212 degree water. So keep this natural law, this phenomenon in mind of that tiny little bit of a difference and what it can yield over the course of time, just like the small marginal difference between 15 times of turning a can over or 17 times or 20 times. So what Nash describes in these pages 15 and 16 when evaluating the grocery store is that there are some simple issues, and it's comical in a way for me to say simple, because when he's talking about the simple, he's talking about picking out the best location for the building, getting a state-of-the-art building built, housing competent people for the employees, decor, inventory. So everything that it takes to be able to open the doors and provide valuable products that folks want at low prices. So all of that he called the simple part. When he's establishing this grocery store analogy, what he calls the complicated part is imagine we're there. Imagine the store has everything that it needs. You're up and you're running, a beautiful place, beautiful building, wonderful people, the hired help, the staff, the low prices, everything, the inventory. The question is, the complicated part is, remember those captive customers, the family members, the captive customers. He asked, where is your wife going to shop? That was his first question. This is one of the complicated ones. Remember, where's she going to shop? Well, naturally, she should shop at the family grocery store. Okay, but we can't go past that too quickly, and it'll make sense soon as to why that is. We do need to ask, where will those captive customers, those family members, where will they be doing their shopping? Next, which door will they walk out? Will your wife or my wife walk out the front door, or will there be entitlement? Will there be a disregard? And we'll get to how severe of a disregard Nash regards considering or even going out the back door with the groceries. Because sure, you could say, well, it's my store, I can do what I want. But he cautions us severely by saying several things. Firstly, if you do, won't others be tempted to as well? It's not very likely that we'd be able to go out the back door without the hired help, the employees, and the others being able to see and be tempted to do the same themselves. But let's continue looking at our own decision. If we go out the back door without going through the front, that is a polite way of describing, even as the owner, that is a polite way of describing theft. Thievery would be taking place. Now, Nash continues to walk that out. And here's the phrase that we will repeat throughout, and it's don't steal the peas. Don't steal the peas. Don't be a thief. So that will be maintained throughout this entire book review and all of our materials. The principle of not being a thief, recognizing things as they are. This is a business. And moreover, Nash says that instead of paying a regular price, let alone a reduced price or a sale price, what Nash encouraged us was to take another 2 cents, let's say, instead of charging 60 cents per can of peas to our captive customers, including ourselves. What if we were to pay 62 cents per can of peas? He said that additional interest would allow us to have that much more capital to buy more peas for our other customers. So he doesn't say, well, just charge yourself. Well, for sure he doesn't say just go out the back door. That's thievery. It's theft. It's stealing. Don't do it. Don't steal the peas. But he doesn't even say, well, just charge yourself 57 cents. Give the family a discount. In fact, what he says, because they're captive customers, because there's an inherent sensibility in those captive customers buying from our grocery store or the family store, then let's charge 2 more cents on ourselves and our captive customers, 62 cents instead of 60 cents. And that extra capital is just going to allow us to be able to grow and scale. Again, remember the overall picture. The overall picture of we want to have a great income in the here and now as we run our business, sure. And we have the eventual option of selling this, what we expect to be highly profitable, well-run business in the future. And if we would put these principles into play, what we will find is that over the course of 10, 20, 30, 40, however many years, the difference between our store and some other store will be more and more stark. I mean, if we apply the principles of don't steal the peas, and then also let's add some extra interest, let's build up our capital, let's not hesitate to build up our capital, which allows us to put more on the shelves, grow and expand and scale. Then 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, we just get further and we set ourselves further and further apart from the competition. And he points out, if they're even still in business, because if they have the mentality of stealing the peas, it's going to be a downward spiral. So not only if they were to just maintain honesty, but for sure if those same principles are not adhered to by others, which they won't. I mean, the vast majority will not. The human part, the human issue is too strong in so many cases. So let's remember, when stealing is taking place, who is it that ultimately pays for that? Who really ultimately pays for everything, in fact? What's the consumer? If theft is an issue and the normal price were 60 cents for the can of peas, that will have to be accounted for. That will have to be accommodated for. And the consumer will ultimately be the person that covers that price, because as a business, we're going to be running in a profit. That's the whole purpose and goal. So that will not be on us. The price will just go up if some part of the process of delivering that value of groceries to customers grows. So let's make sure to use what Nash described as scrupulous honesty when evaluating where we would choose to buy and which door we would walk out of with those peas. Remember, don't steal the peas. So this has been an absolute pleasure for me to go over these pages in R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. If you would like to have a conversation about how to implement the infinite banking concept into your household, your business, or your investing, then you can reach me at 828-817-4223, or you can email durhamtalents@gmail.com. I look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day. Take care. Is that from that right there? Well, that's one way to turn the light on. Phenomenon of boiling water creates why? I can do better than that. So let's look quickly at come to the dark side.